Hello, Shadarek here with a War Within Season 2 Mythic Plus guide for Havoc Demon Hunter. For the purposes of this, I just wanted to go over the WoWhead guide, which I update and maintain, and go into some things in Mythic Plus that may not necessarily be as fleshed out in the guide, or just in a video format as I have been getting repeated requests for this. So, to start with, let's start with gearing. When it comes to gear, regardless of the talents you play, although Eldrachi is what is recommended, you're going to be stacking Critical Strike and Mastery. I get asked often, how much haste should I have? That is something where you really don't need much at all. Your tier set has some haste built into it, and that will typically just be the amount that you want, around 6 to 7%. There's nothing too important about it, and in the long run, in Bisc gear, it's just a couple key items like Jasper Diamond and your tier pieces that will be providing all the haste that you need. Other than that, you're just stacking Critical Strike and Mastery. As for Trinkets, a bit of a different story. Now, there is different recommendations. First things first, the Improvised Thorium Pacemaker is the best trinket that you can run. It's passive, you don't have to play around it at all, you don't have to track or think about it. It's a very good trinket in all use cases, both in Raid and M+, but it is BIS for M+. From there, you have a few different options. There's House of Cards and Signet of the Priory. Typically, this is a run one or the other, as you don't want to run double on use. However, Havoc doesn't deal large amounts of burst right now while playing Eldrachi Reaver, so House of Cards at Myth Track may be BIS, but not by a large margin, and it is, or rather it can be difficult to use, as you don't really just sync it up to meta, you have to use it on its minute and a half timer and align your burst into it. Other trinket options, there's Signet, which is more or less a worse version of House of Cards, but if you have it on Myth Track, where you don't have a Mythic House of Cards, it can be a good option as well. Other than that, there are very good Delve trinkets that are passives. Mechanical Core Amplifier is the best one that you can get other than Pacemaker, and running them as a combo where you have Mechanical Core Amplifier on Heroic Track is what I would recommend for most players, instead of playing one of the on-use options. And if you don't have Mechanical Core Amplifier, you can run Suspicious Energy Drink. This just gives you Mastery. Again, with these, you don't think about the procs in any way, but they just increase how much damage you're going to be dealing without you having to put any work into it. When it comes to crafting, you should really just craft what is going to be the biggest upgrade for you in the meantime. However, if you're looking for long-term goals for Mythic Plus, you don't want to go for Ascension. Ascension is a raid embellishment, and while it's BIS in raid, you will want to replace it with Dawn Thread Lining, which will mean you have to have two actual craft pieces of armor. They cannot be jewelry or weapons to put the Dawn Thread Lining on. This can be really any slot. Currently, at the time of making this video, I have them on my belt and bracers, but depending on what you need to craft for your character and what will be the biggest upgrade for you, Dawn Thread Lining can go on anything. That about sums up gear. Next, I want to move on to consumables. Now, when I have made this for the WoWhead guide, the options that are listed here are mostly thinking about raid and Authority of Radiant Power. It's a good middle of the pack option where it's good in both single target, not technically BIS, and it's also good in AoE, but it's not BIS there either. When it comes to Mythic Plus, now that we've gotten a good amount of item level, you do actually want to run Stat Enchants. Depending on what you have on your character, this can either be Council's Guile or Stonebound Artistry, which is a critical strike and the Mastery procs. You can also just run one of each to be safe. There's not really any preference of one over the other. Crit and Mastery are very similar in value. Every other enchant is the same. You just want to run your Avoidance on Cloak and Bracers. Crystalline Radiance is the only chest option. Stormbound Armor Kit is the best one you can get. Defender's March on your boots just for a little bit of stamina. and then you can either run Critical Strike or Mastery Enchants based on what you need more for your character. That's always just comes up to Sims. That's something that's particular to your character. As for consumables, one I get asked often about is whetstones versus mana oil. At this point in the expansion, mana oils have outscaled whetstones, so they're always better, slightly. The only time that I ever run whetstones is if I'm just looking to save gold, as they're cheaper. But if you're just looking for power, Olgari Mana Oil is what you should use. It is stronger. Combat pots, obviously it's only going to be tempered potions. For flasks, you should use Alchemical Chaos, and the reason for running this is that tempered potions give you all 4 stats if you use Alchemical Chaos, whereas if you use, say, a Critical Strike flask, it will only buff the stats that are not Critical Strike. So it makes your tempered potion weaker to run a single stat flask, and that makes Alchemical Chaos better for us in all cases. For food, you just want secondary stat food. Beladar's Bounty is typically the cheapest option here, and you can also make it hardy by leveling up your cooking so that it persists through death. And as for gems, you want to run one combinating Blasphemite, which has a slight critical effect increase, and then you just want to stack one of every color of gem, so one crit, mastery, haste, and versatility gem, and from there, any remaining slots could be filled with critical strike or mastery. As that covers all of the consumables, I want to move on next to talent builds. Really, there's a very limited amount of options that I would recommend. I have been getting asked recently about Felsguard, as I do run it on my alt Demon Hunter, and I do run it in Floodgate as well, something specific for our comp. But I'll go over that in just 1 second. The Low Mover build is the one that I recommend. Basically, you have the option to run Low Mover or run Exergy. Exergy takes Tactical Retreat, and Exergy for the loss of Looks Can Kill and Serrated Glaive. I think Exergy is just more difficult to play. It puts you in more dangerous situations, and the DPS that it provides is more or less about equivalent to what Looks Can Kill and Serrated Glaive give to you. So I don't consider it to be a actual gain, and I think the Low Mover build is the one that is best to run. For Felsguard, it's actually the exact same build. The only thing that is swapped is looking at the class tree. You no longer run Sigil of Spite, and you go down and get Collective Anguish again. Other than that, there is nothing else that is changed between Eldrazi Reaver and Felsguard, and it's still the build that I recommend. You can run Inertia for Felsguard, but it is significantly more difficult to play for, again, a minor gain, and I just do not recommend it. That covers the talent builds, and really this is all that I would recommend, is just this one single build. There is also questions of running raid builds in dungeons like Theater or Workshop. I think Theater has too little pure single target to actually run it. I did try running it multiple times, and I found that the M+ build serves me better, and you don't really lose that much single target for it either. Lastly, we have Rotation. Now, for anyone that hasn't used the WoWhead tools before, there's different sections for openers, and you can open whether you're looking at single target, AoE, or various things like that. Now, this page will be getting reworked soon, so it won't necessarily look like it does in this video in the future, but the rotations will not really be changing. When it comes to the openers, I get asked often why my openers and my keys don't necessarily line up to what is on the WoWhead guide, or in other places where I recommend how to play the class. The answer to that is you can't always do what's perfect. Now, what's done in a sim and is technically the best damage is not something that you can do in every single key and every single pull. You have to consider things like threat and packs being grouped. Plus, there's also the difference of what kind of cooldowns you have going into a pack. For example, while the AoE sequence here has you open with Sigil of Flame, and then move into your Hunt, Reaver's Glaive, you Chaos Strike and Blade Dance, which will then proc your Thrill of the Fight. You spam out your Immolation Auras, and then you go into your Eye Beam window. if a pack is getting set up and you're not able to press all these in that order, then pressing Hunt might just rip, threat, and kill you. In times like that, very often, I will press my Sigil of Flame and then start using my Immolation Auras, or if I already have Reaver's Glaive up from a previous pull, I'll throw that, then put out Immolation Auras, so that I'm not putting out as damaging of abilities to not rip threat, but you're also not pressing nothing. You're getting buttons that you will need to press out of the way earlier, and while it's not as efficient if you were to press everything in a perfect order, it is better to do that than wait and try to press everything in a perfect order after. With Eldrachi, it's not important to have a precise and exact rotation. It's important to continue casting and get your cooldowns on cooldown and have them always rotating. The number one mistake I see players make when I watch over their VODs and try to do any coaching is they will try to do intentional and proper setup. They'll be holding Blade Dance so they have Death Sweep for their I-Beam window. They'll be holding their Reaver's Glaive to press once Blade Dance is already up. And doing stuff like this means you're going to be holding your cooldowns. That is almost always going to be a more significant damage loss than any setup will give you. So that's something to consider. But the opener is right here, and while this is ideal, again, this isn't something you necessarily will be able to always do. Now, coming down to the AoE multi-target rotation, Reaver's Glaive is the highest priority, as long as you have spent both your Glaive Flurry and your Rending Strike buffs, which is from casting your Blade Dance and your Chaos Strike. In AoE, Chaos Strike always has to be used first, with Blade Dance second, and that is so that the Glaive Flurry is buffed and does double the amount of slashes on the Blade Dance, which is much better at 2 targets plus. Any time that you are in single target, you don't have to worry whether it's Blade Dance or Chaos Strike first. Whichever one is up, you can press first. But when it comes to 2 targets and higher, you always need to Chaos Strike before you Blade Dance. Next, if you're capped on Immolation Auras, that is your priority to hit. Once that is done, you want to press the Hunt if you have no available Reaver's Glaive charges. And if you do that, and then your buff's already used, that would be going back to the top and using your Reaver's Glaive then. From there, Death Sweep should be used on cooldown, and then Sigil of Spite, I-Beam, and Metamorphosis. If I-Beam is coming up within a few seconds, you should hold Metamorphosis for after the I-Beam, use your I-Beam and your Death Sweep, and then pressing Metamorphosis will reset the cooldowns on both I-Beam and your Death Sweep due to our talent, Chaotic Transformation. After that, we have Blade Dance, and then Immolation Auras if you're not capped on 2 charges. This is if you have any remaining charges, then it's a lower priority to use than putting out your Death Sweeps, Blade Dances, and all that. And one thing that's very important to note, and that I see mistakes a lot of the time, is Sigil of Flame is higher in priority to press than Annihilation or Chaos Strike. This includes even if you will overcap Fury. In AoE, it's more important for you to use Sigil of Flame nearly on cooldown, as well as Sigil of Spite and the Hunt, to constantly keep up your generation of souls and Reaver's Glaive charges, as those will be the most significant increases to your AoE damage. Very often I see people trying to use Sigil of Flame specifically to generate Fury. But when it comes to Mythic Plus, I don't treat Fury as my resource. I think about souls as my resource when it comes to AoE. In single target, this changes a bit, and you do need a bit more Fury, so there can be some things you play around and try to min-max the Fury generation there. But in AoE, this is typically never an issue, and you're kind of fighting to always keep all your cooldowns on cooldown. Also important to note is Fellblade is your lowest priority button. You only really press this if you are out of Fury and cannot Chaos Strike or Annihilate, or if you need to charge to get back into range of a target. So, that about covers all of the rotation. One thing I'd like to do is very quickly go to a target dummy, which I will pull up here. Next, I just wanted to show the rotation live on a dummy. As a live example, before your tank has even started pulling mobs, you are able to press Sigil of Flame as they're walking into a pack. This will cause a soul to be generated, and this is a global that you can get out of the way before a pack is even pulled just to gain an extra global. So as your tanks are walking in, typically you're going to drop your Sigil of Flame. Then you're going to hunt, throw your Reaver's Glaive, press your Chaos Strike, and your Blade Dance. You're going to use your Immolation Auras. Then you go into your I-Beam window. I-Beam. Death Sweep isn't back up yet. I'll Death Sweep now. Metamorphosis. Death Sweep again. Annihilation. Use I-Beam. From there, you can start spending your Reaver's Glaives again. And when it comes to it in AoE, you have a couple things to think about. Now, looking at your Reaver's Glaive, you're actually able to store up an infinite amount of souls, which means an infinite amount of Reaver's Glaives. The only downside to this is they only last 30 seconds from the time you last pick up a soul, but if you're, for example, fighting a single target that is of great value, you may want to save your Reaver's Glaives and carry them over into the next pack. So while you can continue generating souls, you can store damage for a pack that is going to be more important. Maybe it's larger or has a more important prior mob, so you can choose where your damage goes in a key. As an example, now that you can see on my Reaver's Glaive tracker down here that I have 9 souls. When I throw a glaive, I will still have 9 souls, and until I actually pick up another soul, it won't give me another Reaver's Glaive. At that point, it will minus 6, as well as the soul that I picked up, and you can have any amount of those stored up that you wish. So when it comes to going into a more dangerous pull, think a mini boss that's pulled into some trash, or if you want to save damage for something particular, you can do so in a key, and this is where you can't simply follow a rotation guide. So despite what the priority list says, it's not as clear-cut as you just always spend your Reaver's Glaives. If you're just trying to do AoE damage fast and do burst, then you can spend everything that you have on repeat, but it is a good habit in Mythic Plus to try to carry a Reaver's Glaive over from the previous pack into a new one, so you can start with your Reaver's Mark out, and you can build up more souls and more Reaver's Glaives for bigger burst on more important pulls, depending how you feel the dungeon is going. This is something that's particular to the tank that you're playing with, which can be a bit difficult when you're playing with pugs, and there's not one clear good answer for this. While the way that I typically do it is I think about what priority mobs are most important to kill in a dungeon, and I try to save up souls going into those pulls. It's not always so clean, and if you ever have downtime, you will lose your souls, and they will expire. As I mentioned, they only have that 30-second timer, and if you ever die, you do lose all your souls and your Reaver's Glaives that are currently stocked up, which again turns into a significant DPS loss. Thank you for watching my Mythic Plus guide for Havoc Demon Hunter in the War Within Season 2. I will continue updating the WoWhead guide, which will be packed with information. If you have any additional questions, you can find me in my Discord, which will be linked in the description below, or in my live streams at twitch.tv/Shadarek. If you like the content, or if you have any feedback, please leave a comment and let me know. Consider subscribing if this or my key content is something you like to watch. I appreciate all the support. Until next time.